The world outside remains a constant whirl of movement and sound, a tapestry of expectations and demands that often feels like a tide pulling us further from the shore of our own inner quiet. We find ourselves navigating through streets filled with the hum of engines and the chatter of digital notifications, each one vying for a fragment of our attention until we feel scattered, like leaves caught in a restless wind. It is in these moments of overwhelm that we might wonder if peace is merely a distant memory or a luxury reserved for those who can retreat to a mountain top, away from the complexities of modern life. Yet, the wisdom that has been passed down through generations suggests that stillness is not the absence of noise, but a quality of presence that we carry within us, even when the storms of life are raging at their peak. Imagine a vast ocean where the surface is whipped into white foam by a passing gale, with waves crashing and churning in a display of untamed energy. To an observer on a small boat, the chaos seems absolute, yet only a few meters below that turbulent surface, the water remains calm, cool, and undisturbed. The depths of the sea do not struggle against the waves above, nor do they try to stop the wind from blowing. They simply exist in their inherent nature, providing a foundation of silence that the surface noise can never truly reach. This is the potential of the human heart, a sanctuary that remains accessible regardless of how many deadlines are looming or how many voices are calling out for our time. There is a beautiful account from the time of the Buddha involving a young man named Sangamaji, whose life offers a gentle reflection on what it means to remain centered when the world expects us to react. Sangamaji had chosen a path of deep reflection and sat beneath a tree in a quiet grove, absorbed in the clarity of his own mind. His former wife, carrying their young child, came to find him, hoping to draw him back into the complexities and responsibilities of the life he had left behind. She placed the child in front of him, speaking words meant to stir his emotions and provoke a response, yet Sangamaji remained as still as the earth itself. He did not look at her with anger, nor did he turn away in a show of coldness. He simply sat in a state of profound equilibrium, neither grasping at the past nor pushing away the present moment. When the woman eventually took the child and departed, seeing that her efforts could not shake his inner foundation, the Buddha observed this interaction and remarked on the strength of a mind that has found its own home. This story does not suggest that we must abandon our families or our duties to find peace, but rather points to the possibility of developing a mental space that is not easily swayed by the shifting winds of external circumstances. It invites us to consider how much of our daily stress comes from our internal reaction to the noise, rather than the noise itself. We often believe that if we could just fix one more problem, settle one more argument, or clear one more task from our list, then we would finally be able to relax. We treat peace as a destination at the end of a long and tiring journey, a prize to be earned once the world finally decides to be quiet. However, the world rarely cooperates with our desire for silence. There will always be a car horn, a misunderstanding, or a sudden change in plans. If our well-being depends on everything going perfectly, we place our happiness in the hands of forces we cannot control. Instead of waiting for the environment to change, we can begin to look at how we relate to the sounds and pressures around us. Think of a musician who is practicing a delicate piece of music. If a bird starts chirping outside the window, the musician has two choices. They can become frustrated, losing their rhythm and cursing the bird for the interruption, or they can simply allow the bird's song to become part of the background, a natural texture that does not diminish the beauty of the notes they are playing. When we stop fighting the noise, it loses its power to agitate us. This process of finding calm is like tending a garden in the middle of a busy city. You cannot stop the sirens from wailing or the crowds from passing by the gate, but you can focus on the soil beneath your hands and the slow, steady growth of the flowers you have planted. Every time we take a conscious breath, every time we choose to respond with kindness instead of irritation, we are watering the seeds of tranquility. We begin to realize that the pressure we feel is often a result of trying to be in two places at once, worrying about what happened yesterday or fearing what might happen tomorrow, while the present moment is ignored. In the ancient records, there is a story of a traveler who was caught in a sudden downpour while crossing a wide plain. There was no shelter to be found, and the mud grew thick under his feet. At first, the traveler ran, slipping and sliding, his mind filled with complaints about the ruined day and his soaked clothes. But as he realized there was nowhere to hide, he slowed his pace. He felt the cool rain on his skin and heard the rhythmic splashing of his footsteps. The situation had not changed, the rain was still falling and he was still wet, but his internal state had shifted from resistance to a quiet acceptance. He finished his journey not with exhaustion, but with a surprising sense of refreshment. Our lives are often like that rainy plain. We spend so much energy running away from the discomforts of a noisy world that we miss the simple grace of being alive. We can learn to walk through the rain without being drowned by it. This does not mean we become passive or indifferent to the world's problems. On the contrary, a mind that is calm is much more capable of taking effective action. When the surface of a lake is still, it reflects the moon and the trees with perfect clarity. When the water is muddy and turbulent, everything is distorted. By cultivating a quiet heart, we see our lives and our choices more clearly, allowing us to move through the day with a sense of purpose and ease. There is a subtle joy in discovering that we do not need to be anywhere else but where we are right now. We often feel a sense of urgency, a nagging thought that we are falling behind or that we should be doing more. This urgency is like a heavy backpack we carry everywhere, filled with stones of should and must. When we pause and acknowledge the noise without being swept up by it, we are setting that backpack down for a moment. We realize that the sky is still blue above the clouds of our busy thoughts. Many people find that the simple act of listening can be a gateway to this inner stillness. Not listening to judge or to categorize, but simply hearing the world as it is. If you listen to the sound of a fan, the ticking of a clock, or the distant murmur of traffic, you might notice that there is a space of silence from which these sounds arise and into which they disappear. By focusing on that underlying silence, the sounds themselves become less intrusive. They are like ripples on the surface of that deep ocean we imagined earlier. In one of the old chronicles, there is an account of a group of people who were arguing loudly about a matter of little importance. They were so caught up in their own voices that they didn't notice a wise elder sitting nearby. When they finally turned to him and asked for his opinion, he didn't join the argument or tell them who was right. He simply asked them to listen to the sound of the wind in the leaves for 1 minute. As they stood in silence, the heat of their anger began to dissipate. The problem that seemed so massive just moments before suddenly felt small in the context of the vast, breathing world around them. This is the perspective we often lose when we are caught in the noise. We forget that we are part of something much larger than our immediate worries. We forget that the same rhythm that moves the stars and changes the seasons is also moving through us. When we align ourselves with that rhythm, the pressures of the world begin to feel less like a burden and more like a dance. It is a dance that requires us to be light on our feet, ready to move with the music even when the tempo changes unexpectedly. Finding peace is not about reaching a state where nothing ever goes wrong. It is about building a relationship with ourselves that is based on compassion and patience. When we find ourselves becoming stressed by the noise, we can acknowledge it with a soft smile, as if recognizing an old, somewhat loud friend. We can say to ourselves, "Ah, here is the world being the world again," and then return our attention to the simple reality of our breath or the feeling of our feet on the ground. This return to the physical senses is a powerful anchor. The mind can travel to 1,000 different places, weaving complex stories of worry and regret, but the body is always in the present. By noticing the warmth of sunlight on our hands or the texture of the chair we are sitting in, we ground ourselves in the only moment that truly exists. In this grounding, the noise of the world begins to recede into the distance, no longer the center of our universe. It is helpful to remember that everyone we encounter is also navigating their own version of this noisy world. The person who cuts us off in traffic or the colleague who speaks sharply is often reacting to their own internal pressure. When we understand this, our irritation can soften into a quiet empathy. We are all in this together, trying to find our way through the fog of a distracted age. This shared human experience can be a source of connection rather than conflict. There was a time when a young woman approached a teacher, complaining that her mind was like a cage full of monkeys, jumping from branch to branch and never resting. She asked how she could make the monkeys stop. The teacher replied that trying to force the monkeys to be still only makes them more agitated. Instead, he suggested she should simply watch them with curiosity, without trying to catch them or quiet them. As she practiced this, she noticed that when she stopped fighting the monkeys, they eventually grew tired and sat down on their own. Our thoughts and the noises of the world are like those monkeys. The more we struggle against them, the more power they have over us. Peace is found in the space between our thoughts, in the quiet pauses between words, and in the stillness that remains when we stop trying to control everything. It is a quiet confidence that says, whatever happens, I have the capacity to meet it with a steady heart. This confidence is not born of arrogance, but of a deep understanding of our own resilience. We have survived every difficult day we have ever faced, and that strength is still within us, waiting to be rediscovered in the silence. As we move through our day, we can look for small pockets of quiet. It might be the moment after we turn off the engine of the car before stepping out, or the few seconds before we answer a ringing phone. These are not just gaps in time, they are opportunities to reconnect with our inner center. They are like small clearings in a dense forest, where the light can reach the ground and we can breathe more freely. The beauty of this path is that it does not require us to change who we are or where we live. We don't need a special room or a specific set of tools. We only need the willingness to be present with ourselves, exactly as we are, in the midst of the noise. We can be a point of stillness in a turning world, a light that remains steady even when the wind blows. This steady light doesn't just benefit us, it becomes a quiet presence that others can sense, a reminder that peace is possible for everyone. Think of a bell that has been struck. The sound is loud at first, filling the air with its vibration, but then it slowly begins to fade, becoming thinner and more delicate until it merges back into the silence from which it came. Our experiences are like that sound. They arise, they have their moment, and then they pass away. If we try to hold on to the sound, we only experience frustration. But if we allow the sound to fade naturally, we are left with the profound quiet that follows. This quiet is not empty, it is full of potential, like the stillness of a seed before it begins to sprout. In the old stories, there is a mention of a kingdom where the people were always in a hurry, always shouting, and always stressed. One day, a stranger arrived who walked slowly and spoke in a whisper. The people thought he was strange, but they noticed that wherever he went, the air seemed to become calmer. People stopped shouting and started listening to one another. The stranger didn't give any speeches or tell anyone what to do. He simply carried his own peace so clearly that it became contagious. We each have the ability to be that stranger in our own lives and in the lives of those around us. When we are no longer driven by the need to react to every noise, we find a new kind of freedom. We can choose how to spend our energy, rather than having it drained by every passing distraction. This freedom is the true meaning of a quiet heart. It is the ability to stay cool in the heat of a crisis and to find beauty in the most ordinary moments. It is the realization that the peace we have been searching for has been with us all along, hidden under the layers of our own busyness. As the sun sets and the day begins to fold into the night, the world naturally slows down. The shadows lengthen, and the birds return to their nests. We can mirror this natural rhythm in our own lives, allowing the concerns of the day to settle like dust on a quiet road. We don't need to carry the noise of today into tomorrow. Each morning is a fresh start, a new opportunity to practice the art of being still. The noise will return, of course. The world will continue to be loud, and pressures will continue to arise. But we can meet them with a different spirit. We can remember the ocean depths, the traveler in the rain, and the quiet grove where Sangamaji sat. We can remember that our true nature is not defined by the noise, but by the silence that holds it all. In that silence, we find the strength to be kind, the clarity to be wise, and the peace to be truly ourselves. Our true essence is much like the vast, open sky that remains untouched by the clouds passing through it, whether those clouds are dark and heavy with rain or light and wispy in the summer heat. The noise of the world, the pressures of our careers, and the digital hum that follows us into our homes are merely those clouds, drifting by on the winds of time. If we identify only with the clouds, we feel every shift in the weather as a personal crisis, but if we remember that we are the sky, we can watch the weather change with a sense of curious detachment. This perspective allows us to remain spacious and clear, providing a home for whatever arises without being diminished by it. In the chronicles of ancient times, there is a story of a merchant who traveled far to see a renowned teacher known for his unshakable calm. The merchant arrived at a moment of great commotion, as the village was preparing for a festival and the streets were filled with shouting, music, and the dust of many feet. He found the teacher sitting near the edge of the marketplace, and the merchant asked how it was possible to maintain such a serene expression amidst the chaos of the crowd. The teacher did not answer with a long lecture, but instead asked the merchant to hold a bowl filled to the very brim with oil. He told the merchant to walk through the crowded market to the other side of the village and back without spilling a single drop. The merchant set off, his entire being focused on the surface of the oil. He stepped carefully over stones, swerved around dancing children, and ignored the loud calls of the vendors. When he returned, sweating but successful, the teacher asked him what he had seen in the market. The merchant replied that he had seen nothing but the oil, heard nothing but his own breath, and noticed no one. The teacher smiled and said that while this was a feat of concentration, true peace is being able to see the dancers, hear the music, and navigate the crowd while still keeping the bowl of the heart steady and full. This story reminds us that the goal is not to shut the world out or to become blind to our surroundings. We are meant to live fully, to participate in the festival of life, and to engage with our responsibilities. The secret lies in the quality of our attention. When our attention is fragmented, pulled in a dozen directions by every notification and every passing thought, the oil of our inner peace spills easily. But when we learn to maintain a gentle, singular focus on our own presence, we can move through the most crowded and noisy environments with a heart that remains level and calm. We often feel that the noise is something being done to us, a violation of our right to be quiet. This feeling of being a victim of our environment creates a subtle layer of resentment that feeds our stress. Yet, if we look closely, we might see that much of the noise is actually invited in. We check our phones when we are bored, we turn on the television to drown out the silence of an empty room, and we fill our schedules to avoid the discomfort of having nothing to do. We have become so accustomed to the stimulation that the absence of it can feel threatening. Learning to be comfortable with silence is like befriending a shy animal. At first, it might feel awkward or even a bit scary to sit in a room without any background noise, watching the thoughts as they rise and fall. We might notice a sense of restlessness, a desire to reach for something to occupy our minds. But if we stay with that restlessness, if we look it in the eye with kindness, it eventually settles down. We discover that silence is not a void, but a rich and fertile ground. It is the place where our most creative ideas are born and where our deepest healing takes place. There is a touching account of a queen from the era of the Buddha, whose life was filled with the grandeur and the heavy duties of the palace. Despite her high status, she often felt a sense of emptiness and a longing for something more substantial than jewels and titles. She sought out the company of those who lived simply, and she began to practice the art of being fully present in each moment, whether she was dressing in her royal robes or walking in the palace gardens. She realized that the noise of her life was not the crown she wore, but the importance she attached to it. When she learned to wear her responsibilities lightly, like a silk scarf rather than a heavy chain, her inner world became a garden of tranquility. We can apply this same lightness to our own roles. We are parents, employees, friends, and citizens, and each of these roles carries its own set of expectations. If we grip these identities too tightly, the pressure becomes unbearable. We feel we must perform perfectly, and any criticism or setback feels like a personal attack. But if we see these roles as costumes we wear for a time, we can perform our duties with excellence and heart without losing ourselves in the process. We can be busy on the outside while remaining still on the inside, much like a spinning top that appears motionless because it is rotating so perfectly. The pressure to succeed and the fear of failure are two of the loudest noises in the modern world. They whisper to us that we are not enough, that we must run faster and achieve more to justify our existence. This constant striving is like trying to catch the horizon. No matter how far we run, it is always just out of reach. We can choose to stop running. We can recognize that our value is not determined by our productivity or our bank account. Our value is inherent, a natural part of being alive. When we accept this truth, the frantic energy of the world begins to lose its grip on us. Think of a tree standing in a field during a storm. The branches may sway and the leaves may be torn away, but the trunk remains firm because its roots go deep into the earth. Our roots are our values, our integrity, and our connection to the present moment. When we cultivate these roots through daily reflection and acts of kindness, we become like that tree. The storms of life will still come, but they will not be able to uproot us. We can stand tall, knowing that the wind will eventually die down and the sun will shine again. There is a beautiful teaching about a small bird that lived in a forest that caught fire. While all the other animals were running away in terror, the little bird flew to a nearby stream, dipped its wings in the water, and flew back to drop a few droplets on the flames. It did this over and over again. A celestial being looked down and asked the bird why it was bothering with such a hopeless task, as its few drops of water could never put out the fire. The bird replied that it was doing what it could within its own capacity. This story speaks to the power of small actions in a world that often feels overwhelmed by massive problems. The noise of global crises and social unrest can make us feel helpless and anxious. We might feel that our own efforts to find peace are insignificant. But just as the bird's devotion was a testament to its character, our commitment to our own inner quiet has a ripple effect. When we are at peace, we treat our families better, we listen more deeply to our friends, and we bring a sense of calm to our workplaces. We may not be able to quiet the whole world, but we can quiet the part of the world that we inhabit. The art of keeping the heart steady also involves a shift in how we perceive time. We are often living in a state of hurry sickness, always looking toward the next thing on our agenda. We eat our breakfast while thinking about our first meeting, and we are in that meeting while worrying about what to cook for dinner. This mental time travel is exhausting and creates a sense of constant friction. If we can bring our full attention to whatever we are doing, even the most mundane task becomes a form of meditation. Washing a cup can be an act of grace if we feel the warmth of the water and the smoothness of the porcelain. In the old traditions, there is a story of a monk who was known for his incredible speed in completing his chores. People assumed he was rushing, but when they observed him closely, they saw that he moved with a deliberate, flowing grace. He was not fast because he was hurried, he was fast because he was completely focused. He didn't waste any energy on resistance or distraction. Every movement was precise and necessary. This is the efficiency of a calm mind. By removing the internal noise of, "I don't want to do this," or "I wish I were finished," we find that we have much more energy available to us. The world's noise often takes the form of comparison. We see the highlighted lives of others on our screens and feel a sense of inadequacy. We compare our behind the scenes with their front of house, forgetting that everyone has their own struggles and their own noisy thoughts. This comparison is a thief of joy and a major source of mental clutter. To find peace, we must learn to turn down the volume on these external standards and listen to the quiet voice of our own intuition. What brings you a sense of genuine meaning? What makes your heart feel light? These are the questions that lead us toward our own unique path of stillness. There was a traveler in a desert who was desperately thirsty. He saw a mirage of a lake in the distance and ran toward it, only to find nothing but sand. He saw another and another, each time becoming more exhausted and more discouraged. Finally, he met a guide who showed him how to dig deep into the earth beneath his own feet. After some effort, the traveler found a cool, clear spring of water. The peace we seek is like that spring. We spend so much time chasing mirages in the external world, thinking that a new job, a new relationship, or a new location will finally bring us the quiet we crave. But the source of true refreshment is already right where we are. Digging for that spring requires patience and persistence. It means taking time each day to sit with ourselves, even if it is only for a few minutes. It means being willing to look at our own patterns of thought without judgment. We might find that we have been holding on to old grudges or harboring fears that no longer serve us. Releasing these mental burdens is like clearing away the rocks and dirt that block the flow of the spring. As the water begins to rise, it naturally washes away the dust of the world's noise. The beauty of a quiet mind is that it allows us to appreciate the subtle details of life that we often overlook when we are in a rush. We notice the way the light filters through the leaves of a tree, creating a dancing pattern on the ground. We hear the different layers of sound in a garden, from the buzzing of a bee to the rustle of the wind. We become more sensitive to the emotions of others, noticing a flicker of sadness in a friend's eyes or the quiet joy in a child's laughter. This sensitivity is not a weakness, it is a profound form of intelligence that connects us more deeply to the world. In one of the ancient discourses, the Buddha spoke of the importance of choosing our food carefully. He was not just talking about the meals we eat, but the impressions we allow into our minds through our senses. If we constantly consume violent news, angry debates, and superficial entertainment, our minds will naturally become agitated and fearful. Just as we would not choose to eat spoiled food, we can be more selective about the media and the conversations we engage with. We can nourish our minds with things that are beautiful, inspiring, and true. This doesn't mean we should ignore the reality of suffering or become disconnected from current events. It means we approach the world with a sense of balance. We can stay informed without being overwhelmed. We can witness the noise of the world without letting it become our own internal soundtrack. By creating a filter of mindfulness, we protect the sanctuary of our hearts, ensuring that we have the inner resources to be of service to others. When we are at peace, our presence becomes a gift to everyone we meet. Have you ever been around someone who is truly centered and calm? There is a palpable sense of ease that surrounds them. They don't need to say anything special, their very being is a reminder that it is possible to remain steady in a shifting world. By cultivating our own inner quiet, we become a beacon for others, a quiet assurance that the noise does not have to be the final word. The journey toward a quiet heart is not a linear one. There will be days when the noise feels louder than ever and our patience wears thin. In those times, the most important thing is to be gentle with ourselves. We are not aiming for a perfect, unbroken silence, but for a resilient peace that can recover from a disturbance. If we fall out of balance, we simply notice it and start again. Each moment is a new chance to breathe, to ground ourselves, and to return to the stillness that is our home. Consider the nature of a mirror that sits in a dusty room where people are constantly moving and shouting. The mirror does not argue with the dust, nor does it try to push away the reflections of the angry faces or the chaotic movements. It simply remains what it is, a clear, polished surface. When the room is cleaned, the mirror is still there. When the room is messy, the mirror is still there. Our awareness is that mirror. The noise of a demanding world may cast many shadows and layer much dust upon our daily experience, but the capacity to reflect reality clearly is never truly lost. We only need to wipe away the preoccupation with the reflections to realize the mirror itself is unharmed and perfectly still. In the ancient records of those who walked the path of clarity, there is a story of a monk named Purna, who desired to share the teachings of peace in a region known for its harsh environment and even harsher people. When he asked for permission to go, he was questioned about how he would handle the verbal abuse of the residents. Purna replied that if they scolded him, he would think them kind for not hitting him. If they hit him, he would think them kind for not using sticks. If they used sticks, he would think them kind for not taking his life. Purna had reached a state where his internal peace was not a fragile glass ornament that could be shattered by a loud voice or a rude gesture. He had transformed his mind into a vast mountain that remains unmoved whether the wind blows from the north or the south. This level of resilience is not about being a doormat or lacking feelings. It is about the profound realization that the noise others make is a reflection of their own internal storms, not a definition of our worth. When we stop taking the noise personally, the sting vanishes. We begin to see that a person shouting in anger is often just a person in pain, drowning in their own sea of confusion. This insight allows us to meet the world's friction with a soft heart rather than a clenched fist. By not adding our own noise to the existing clamor, we create a small clearing of sanity that others might eventually find their way into. We often find ourselves caught in the "if only" trap of the mind. If only my neighbors were quieter, if only my boss were more understanding, if only the traffic were lighter, then I would be at peace. This way of thinking makes our happiness a hostage to 1,000 variables that we can never fully govern. True mastery is finding the silence within the sound. It is like the space between the spokes of a wheel. Without that empty, silent center, the wheel could not turn. The activity of our lives is the spinning rim, but the stillness of our being is the hub. When we live from the hub, we can navigate the fastest rotations of life without losing our balance. There is a less-known account from the time of the wandering practitioners concerning a woman named Kisa Gautami after she had found her footing in the teachings. She was once seen sitting by a small flickering oil lamp in the dark of night. As she watched the flames rise and die out, she realized that the lives of all beings are just like those flames. They flicker up and they are extinguished. In that moment of deep observation, the noise of her personal grief and the frantic desire to hold on to what is temporary fell away. She didn't become cold or detached in a negative sense, rather, she became immensely peaceful. She saw that the struggle to make things permanent in a world of change is the loudest noise of all. By accepting the flickering nature of life, she found a silence that no wind could blow out. We spend so much of our time trying to fix the moment, as if the present is a broken machine that needs our constant repair. We want the weather to be different, the food to be better, or our feelings to be more pleasant. This mental friction is a constant source of heat and noise. What happens if, just for a few minutes each day, we decide that the moment is exactly as it should be? Not because it is perfect by the world's standards, but because it is what is happening. When we drop the fixer mentality, a tremendous amount of energy is released. We feel a sudden lightness, as if a heavy engine that has been idling loudly in our heads has finally been turned off. There is a subtle beauty in the mundane that only reveals itself when we are quiet enough to notice. Think of the steam rising from a bowl of soup, the weight of a blanket on your shoulders, or the simple rhythm of a neighbor's footsteps in the hallway. These are the textures of existence. When we are chasing after some loud, bright idea of happiness, we trample over these small graces. Finding peace in a noisy world often means lowering our gaze from the distant horizon and appreciating the earth beneath our feet. It is a form of humility that says, this simple breath is enough. This quiet room is enough. In one of the old parables, a king offered a great prize to the artist who could paint the best picture of peace. Many artists tried. One painted a mirror-like lake reflecting distant mountains. Another painted a beautiful sunset in a lush valley. But the winning painting was quite different. It depicted a rugged, rocky mountain under a dark, stormy sky. Lightning was flashing, and a torrential rain was falling. Yet, in a small crack in the rock, a mother bird had built her nest. There, amidst the roar of the thunder and the lashing of the rain, the bird sat on her nest in perfect peace. This is the peace that matters, the ability to be calm in the very heart of the storm. We can train ourselves to be like that bird. It starts with the way we handle the small irritations. When the internet is slow or a line at the store is long, these are our practice grounds. Instead of sighing or checking our watches with annoyance, we can use that minute to simply be. We can feel the air on our skin and the life in our bodies. we can offer a silent wish of well-being to the person in front of us. These tiny acts of mindfulness are the bricks with which we build a fortress of peace. Eventually, the fortress becomes so strong that even the larger shocks of life cannot pull it down. The modern world often feels like a giant machine designed to keep us in a state of perpetual wanting. Advertisements, social media feeds, and cultural trends all whisper that we need one more thing to be complete. This wanting mind is a noisy mind. It is never satisfied, always looking for the next hit of excitement or the next acquisition. To find stillness, we must practice the art of enoughness. We can look at our lives and acknowledge all that is already present. When we realize we have enough, the noise of craving subsides, and we can finally hear the quiet song of gratitude. Gratitude is a natural silencer of mental static. It is impossible to be truly grateful and deeply stressed at the same moment. When we focus on what is going right, our perspective shifts. We notice the friend who sent a kind text, the health that allows us to walk, the very fact that we can think and feel. This doesn't mean we ignore the difficulties, but we stop giving them the center stage of our attention. We give the center stage to the quiet miracles that sustain us every day. There is a story about a young student who complained to his mentor that the city was too loud for meditation. The mentor took the student to a waterfall and asked him to listen. At first, the student only heard a deafening roar. But as he sat there hour after hour, his ears began to distinguish the different tones of the water, the high splashes, the deep thrums, and the delicate tinkling sounds. He realized that within the great noise, there was a symphony of individual parts, and within that symphony, there was a kind of rhythmic silence. The mentor told him that the city is no different. If you listen to the city as if it were a waterfall, without judging the sounds as good or bad, the noise becomes a flow, and you can remain still within that flow. We can apply this waterfall technique to our own busy lives. When we are in a meeting where everyone is talking at once, or in a household filled with the energy of children and chores, we can hear it as a natural phenomenon. It is just energy moving. By not labeling it as disturbance, we stop the internal reaction that creates stress. We become the observer of the energy, rather than a victim of it. This shift in perception is like stepping back from a large, loud painting to see the whole canvas. Suddenly, the individual splashes of color make sense as part of a larger design. It is also important to recognize that our own speech contributes to the noise of the world. We often speak just to fill the silence, or to assert our opinions, or to complain about our day. Every word we utter carries a certain energy. If we speak with kindness and purpose, we add to the world's harmony. If we speak with bitterness or haste, we add to its discord. Practicing right speech is a powerful way to cultivate inner quiet. Before we speak, we can ask ourselves, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Does it improve upon the silence? By speaking less and with more intention, we find that our inner world becomes significantly more peaceful. In the old days, a group of travelers was crossing a forest at night. They were terrified of the shadows and the strange sounds of the trees. One traveler, however, walked with a steady lamp and a calm pace. When asked how he could be so unafraid, he said that he knew the forest was just trees and the shadows were just the play of his own lamp. He didn't invent monsters in his mind. Much of the noise we fear in the future is just like those forest shadows. We imagine what-if scenarios that fill our hearts with dread. But when we bring the lamp of the present moment to these fears, we see that they have no substance. We only have to deal with what is right in front of us, and that is always manageable. Living with a quiet heart also means being okay with not knowing everything. We live in an age of information overload, where we feel we must have an opinion on every event and an answer to every question. This pressure to know is a burden. There is a profound peace in the words, "I don't know." It is an admission of our limits and an opening to wonder. When we stop trying to figure everything out, we allow life to unfold in its own way. We become more like a leaf floating on a stream, moving with the current rather than trying to swim against it. The current of life is generally benevolent if we stop fighting it. Even the difficult parts, the losses and the changes, are part of the great cycle. When we resist the cycle, we create the noise of suffering. When we flow with it, we find a deep, underlying support. It is like the difference between holding your breath underwater and learning to breathe with the rhythm of the waves. One is a struggle, the other is a state of grace. There was once a potter who made beautiful vessels. A visitor asked him how he managed to make them so symmetrical and smooth. The potter replied that he didn't focus on the outside of the clay, but on the space inside. He worked to keep the center empty and still while the wheel turned. If the center was true, the outside would naturally follow. Our lives are like that clay. If we keep our inner center empty of unnecessary noise and still in its purpose, the outer aspects of our lives will eventually reflect that harmony. We are often afraid of that empty space inside us, thinking it is a sign of loneliness or boredom. But that emptiness is actually our greatest treasure. It is the space where we can truly rest. It is the womb of all potential. When we stop filling that space with constant noise and activity, we discover that we are never truly alone. We are connected to the very fabric of existence. This connection is the ultimate source of peace, a quiet that is not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything. As we walk through the world, we can practice being witnesses to the noise. We can see the busyness, hear the shouting, and feel the pressure, all while saying to ourselves, "I see this, I hear this, but it is not me." This simple detachment creates a buffer of safety. It allows us to be in the world but not of it. We can be efficient, we can be loving, and we can be active, but we remain anchored in the silence that is our true home. This anchor is always there, waiting for us to return to it with a single, conscious breath. Our inner home remains steadfast even when the external walls of our lives seem to tremble under the weight of global uncertainty or personal change. There is a deep comfort in realizing that the peace we cultivate is not a fragile thing that needs a perfect environment to survive, but rather a sturdy companion that walks beside us through every terrain. We often think of peace as a quiet room, but true spiritual maturity is being able to find that same quietude while standing in the middle of a torrential downpour or a crowded train station. It is the ability to maintain the integrity of our own vibration even when the world around us is humming at a much higher and more frantic frequency. In the stories of the elders, there is a mention of a person who sought the secret of happiness from a hermit living in a cave. The hermit told the seeker that the secret was simply to be where your feet are. At first, the seeker was disappointed, thinking the advice too simple to be of any value. But as he walked back down the mountain, he began to notice how often his mind was miles away from his feet. He was walking on a beautiful mountain path, but his mind was in the city, arguing with a merchant. He was feeling the cool breeze, but his mind was worrying about the taxes he had to pay next month. He realized that the noise of his life was not coming from the mountain or the city, but from the constant displacement of his own awareness. When we practice being where our feet are, the world begins to feel much more manageable. The overwhelming noise of life is usually composed of 1,000 different things we think we need to handle all at once. But in reality, we only ever have to handle this one moment. We only have to take this one step, wash this one dish, or listen to this one sentence spoken by a friend. By narrowing our focus to the immediate present, we cut through the static of the everything and everywhere and find the simplicity of the here and now. This simplicity is the very essence of a quiet heart. There is a profound account of a humble weaver from a small village who spent his days in the rhythmic motion of the loom. Though he was not a scholar and had never read the deep philosophical texts, he possessed a radiance that drew people to him. When asked about his practice, he said that he simply wove each thread with a heart of kindness. He did not rush to finish the cloth, nor did he worry about the next one. He was so deeply attuned to the sound of the shuttle and the feel of the yarn that the loom became his world. The noise of the village gossip and the demands of the market did not touch him, because his mind was fully occupied by the grace of his craft. This weaver's life is a reminder that any activity can become a sanctuary if we approach it with a sense of devotion and presence. We don't need to change what we do, but rather how we do it. If we cook a meal with a wandering mind, it is a chore that adds to our fatigue. If we cook with the same presence as that weaver, noticing the colors of the vegetables and the aroma of the spices, it becomes an act of meditation that replenishes our spirit. The noise of the world is often just the friction caused by our own resistance to what we are doing. When we stop resisting and start engaging fully, the friction disappears and a quiet joy takes its place. We also have to be mindful of the noise of our own judgments. We spend a significant amount of energy labeling everything as good or bad, right or wrong, annoying or pleasant. This constant categorization keeps the mind in a state of high alert. It is like having a judge inside our heads who never stops talking. To find true silence, we can practice the art of bare attention. This means observing things as they are, without the immediate need to judge them. If it is raining, it is just rain. If someone is being loud, it is just sound. When we remove the labels, we remove the emotional charge that causes our internal volume to spike. There is an old story about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors came by to express their sympathy, saying it was such bad luck. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A few days later, the horse returned, bringing with it several wild horses. The neighbors cheered at his good luck. The farmer said, "Maybe." Then his son broke his leg trying to train one of the wild horses, and the neighbors mourned his bad luck. Again, the farmer said, "Maybe." Shortly after, the army came to conscript young men for a war, but the son was spared because of his broken leg. The neighbors once again marveled at his luck. The farmer's "maybe" was a gateway to peace. He refused to let the noise of the world's changing fortunes dictate his inner state. He remained in the quiet center of the maybe, where all things are seen as part of a larger, unfolding pattern. By adopting a maybe attitude, we allow ourselves to stay open to life's surprises instead of being crushed by its challenges. The noise of a disappointment can be deafening, but if we hold it with a sense of maybe, we allow room for growth and new perspectives. We realize that today's setback might be the foundation for tomorrow's strength. This doesn't mean we become indifferent, but rather that we become more flexible. A flexible heart can absorb the shocks of a noisy world without breaking, much like a bamboo tree that bends in the wind but remains rooted. The pressure of expectations often creates a high-pitched whine in the background of our lives. We feel we must live up to the image of the perfect parent, the successful professional, or the enlightened practitioner. This noise is self-generated, born of our desire to be seen and validated by others. But when we look into the teachings of the forest traditions, we find that true peace comes from being nobody. Not in a sense of being worthless, but in the sense of letting go of the heavy burden of self-importance. When we don't have to prove anything to anyone, the world becomes much quieter. We can just be ourselves, with all our flaws and beauties, and that is more than enough. There is a touching story about a young student who wanted to impress his master with his progress. He sat in meditation for hours, barely moving, hoping the master would notice his dedication. After several days, the master walked by and asked, "What are you doing?" The student proudly replied, "I am polishing my mind to make it a mirror." The master picked up a piece of brick and started rubbing it against a stone. When the student asked what he was doing, the master said, "I am polishing this brick to make it a mirror." The student realized that no amount of forced effort or polishing can create peace. Peace is our natural state when we stop trying so hard to be something other than what we are. This effortless effort is a key to navigating a noisy world. We think we have to work hard at being peaceful, but peace is actually what remains when we stop working so hard at being stressed. It is like the surface of a pond. You don't have to do anything to make it still. If you just leave it alone, the ripples will settle on their own. Our job is not to create stillness, but to stop stirring the water. We stir the water with our worries, our complaints, and our constant need for stimulation. When we stop the stirring, the stillness that was always there becomes visible. The noise of our technology is perhaps the most pervasive challenge of our time. We are the first generation in history to be reachable at every hour of the day and night. This constant connectivity can make us feel like we are living in a house with no doors or windows, where the world can barge in at any moment. To protect our inner quiet, we must learn to set boundaries. We can create sacred spaces in our day where the digital world is not allowed. It might be the first hour of the morning, the time we spend eating, or a walk in the park. These boundaries are not an act of avoidance, but an act of self-respect. They allow us to hear our own thoughts and to connect with the natural world. There is a story about a traveler who was fascinated by a group of villagers who seemed to live in perfect harmony. He asked the head of the village for their secret. The leader replied that every day at noon, the village bell would ring, and everyone, no matter what they were doing, would stop for 3 minutes of silence. The carpenter would put down his hammer, the children would stop playing, and the cooks would stop stirring their pots. In those 3 minutes, the village became a sanctuary. The leader explained that these short pauses reminded them that they were more than their work and their worries. They were part of a shared silence. We can bring this village bell into our own lives. We can use the natural pauses of our day as reminders to return to our center. When we are waiting for a light to change, or for a computer to load, or for a kettle to boil, instead of reaching for our phones, we can reach for our breath. These small, noon bells can keep us grounded throughout even the most chaotic days. They prevent the noise from accumulating to a point where it feels unbearable. We are cleaning the mirror of our mind in small, frequent bursts, rather than letting the dust build up for years. The noise of the world often triggers our fight or flight response, leaving us in a state of chronic tension. We carry this tension in our shoulders, our jaws, and our chests. By consciously relaxing the body, we can send a signal to the mind that it is safe to be quiet. A soft body encourages a soft heart. When we find ourselves in a noisy environment, we can take a moment to soften our gaze and relax our muscles. This physical shift changes our internal chemistry, making it easier to remain calm. We become like a sponge that allows the water to pass through it, rather than a hard stone that the water crashes against. In the old accounts, there is a description of a forest that was said to be magical because it could echo any sound a person made. If someone walked through it shouting in anger, the forest would shout back until the person was overwhelmed. But if someone walked through it singing a soft melody, the forest would sing back, filling the air with beauty. Our minds are like that forest. The energy we put out into the world is what we experience back in our own internal environment. If we meet the world's noise with more noise, we are only increasing our own suffering. But if we meet it with a quiet, compassionate presence, we find that the world begins to feel much kinder. Compassion is one of the most powerful tools for finding peace. When we are stuck in a traffic jam and feeling our anger rise, we can think about all the other people in their cars. They, too, are tired, they too want to get home to their families, and they too are feeling the pressure of time. When we expand our awareness to include others, our own frustration becomes smaller. We realize that we are all navigating the same noisy sea. This sense of shared humanity acts as a buffer against the sharp edges of the world's friction. We are no longer a solitary person fighting the noise, we are a part of a vast, interconnected life that is doing its best to find balance. There was once a wise woman who lived in a city known for its constant noise and bustle. Her house was on a busy corner, yet everyone who entered felt a profound sense of peace. When asked her secret, she said that she didn't try to keep the noise out. Instead, she imagined that every sound, the shouting, the wheels on the pavement, the sirens, was a prayer. She listened to the world with a heart of prayer. When the noise was loud, she saw it as a loud prayer for help or for connection. When it was soft, it was a quiet prayer of gratitude. By changing the way she heard the world, she transformed the noise into a source of spiritual nourishment. This transformation is available to all of us. It is not about changing the external sounds, but about changing our internal listening. We can listen to the world with the ears of a mother listening to her child, with a heart that is ready to understand and to heal. When we listen this way, the noisy world is no longer an enemy to be defeated. It becomes a place of practice, a place where we can learn the deepest lessons of patience, empathy, and love. Our peace is not a refuge from the world, but a way of being in the world that brings light to everyone we meet. As we go about our day, we can remember that the silence we seek is never more than a breath away. It is always there, beneath the layers of thought and the echoes of the world. Like the underground spring, it is waiting to be found. We don't need to do anything extraordinary to find it, we only need to be still enough to feel its cool, refreshing presence. Each time we choose peace over irritation, we are making the world a little bit quieter and a little bit kinder. This gentle choosing of peace is not a one-time event but a continuous unfolding, like the way a flower opens its petals to the morning light, slowly and without force. We often feel a sense of failure when we lose our temper or when the noise of a difficult day finally gets the better of us, but these moments are simply part of the rhythm of learning. In the old stories, there is a mention of a student who felt discouraged because he kept getting distracted during his quiet time. His teacher pointed to a child learning to walk, noting that the child falls many times before finding their balance. The teacher said that the falling is not a sign of weakness, it is the very process of strengthening the legs. Every time we catch ourselves becoming agitated by the world and gently bring our focus back to a state of calm, we are strengthening our spiritual legs. We can look at the world's turmoil like a grand symphony where every instrument has its own role, even the ones that sound harsh or discordant to our ears. If we focus on just one loud drum, we might feel overwhelmed by its boom, but if we listen to the entire orchestra, the drum becomes a necessary part of the depth and energy of the music. Our lives are much the same. The pressures and the noises are like the different instruments. When we learn to listen with a wide and open heart, we hear the harmony that exists even in the midst of a crescendo. This wide listening is a form of deep acceptance that allows us to be present without being defensive. In a quiet corner of a forgotten monastery, there was once a story told about a monk who was tasked with guarding a sacred flame in a very windy place. He spent all his time building elaborate walls and shields to protect the fire, yet the wind always found a way through the cracks. He was exhausted and filled with anxiety. One day, an elder told him to stop building walls and instead to place the flame inside a simple, sturdy lantern. Once the flame was protected from within, the monk could walk anywhere, even in the middle of a gale, and the light would remain steady. Our inner peace is that flame, and mindfulness is the lantern. Instead of trying to stop the winds of the world from blowing, we focus on the integrity of our own inner protection. This inner protection is built through the small, consistent habits of the heart. It is the way we speak to ourselves when we make a mistake, the way we pause before responding to an angry email, and the way we appreciate the silence of the early morning. When we nourish our inner world with these moments of quality, we become less dependent on the outer world for our sense of well-being. We realize that we carry our own atmosphere with us. Just as a scuba diver carries their own air into the depths of the ocean, we carry our own stillness into the depths of the city. There is a beautiful account of a group of travelers who were lost in a dense fog. They were shouting to one another, their voices full of fear and confusion, which only made the fog feel more suffocating. One traveler decided to stop shouting and instead began to listen for the sound of a distant river he knew was nearby. By becoming quiet, he was able to hear the subtle murmur of the water that everyone else was drowning out with their panic. He followed that sound and led the group to safety. In our noisy world, the river is the voice of our own inner wisdom, which is always flowing. To hear it, we must be willing to let go of our own mental shouting. We often think that to be effective or successful, we must be loud and aggressive. We feel we must shout to be heard in a crowded room. But there is a different kind of power in silence. Think of the way a single candle can illuminate a dark room without making a sound. Or the way the moon pulls the tides of the vast ocean in total silence. This is the power of presence. When we are truly centered and quiet, our actions have a clarity and a weight that words can never achieve. We don't need to shout to make a difference, we only need to be fully ourselves. There was a respected teacher who lived in a village where a great construction project was taking place. The noise of hammers and saws was constant from dawn until dusk. His students asked him how he could possibly find any peace with such a racket. The teacher replied that he did not see the noise as an interruption, but as the sound of people building homes for their families. He saw the effort, the skill, and the hope behind every hammer blow. By connecting with the human story behind the noise, he transformed the irritation into a sense of connection. We can do the same with the sounds that bother us. The neighbor's loud music might be their way of finding joy after a long day. The siren might be the sound of help arriving for someone in need. By reframing our experience in this way, we are moving from a state of resistance to a state of compassion. Resistance is loud and exhausting, while compassion is quiet and restorative. It is like the difference between trying to hold back a flood with your bare hands and learning to build a boat that can float on the water. When we stop fighting the world, we find that the world is no longer our enemy. We can move through it with a sense of ease and even a touch of humor. After all, life is a bit of a divine comedy, and our own self-importance is often the funniest part of all. There is a lovely story about a traveler who was carrying a heavy load of stones. A wise man met him and asked why he was carrying them. The traveler said he was carrying them just in case he needed them for something later. The wise man suggested that he could set the stones down, and if he really needed one later, the earth was full of stones he could pick up then. Our worries are like those stones. We carry them around, just in case, and they create a constant noise of heavy breathing and tired footsteps. When we learn to trust that we will have the strength to handle things as they arise, we can set the stones down and walk with a light heart. This trust is not a blind optimism, but a deep confidence in the process of life. It is the understanding that we are part of a natural order that knows how to find balance. Trees do not worry about whether the spring will come, they simply rest in the winter and grow when the time is right. We can learn to rest in the quiet moments of our lives, knowing that the energy to act will be there when it is needed. This allows us to stop the pre-worrying that adds so much unnecessary noise to our days. The art of being still is also about the art of being kind to our own bodies. We often treat our bodies like machines that should perform on command, and when they feel tired or stressed, we get frustrated with them. This frustration creates a subtle internal noise of conflict. When we treat our bodies with the same care we would give a dear friend, we create a foundation for mental quiet. A few deep breaths, a gentle stretch, or a moment of stillness can do more for our peace of mind than 1,000 hours of analytical thinking. In the old chronicles, there is a description of a great king who was known for his wisdom. He had a ring made for himself that bore a simple inscription, "This too shall pass." He looked at it when he was overwhelmed with joy and when he was burdened with sorrow. This simple truth is a powerful tool for maintaining a quiet heart. When the world is too loud and the pressure is too high, we can remember that it is temporary. It is just a passing cloud in the sky of our awareness. This perspective doesn't change the situation, but it changes how we feel inside it. We can endure the noise because we know that silence will return. We can also find peace by simplifying our desires. The world is constantly trying to sell us new things to want, but every new desire is a new source of noise. When we are content with what we have, the mind becomes like a calm lake. There is no wind of wanting to create ripples on the surface. We find that the simplest things, a cup of tea, a conversation with a loved one, the sight of the stars, are the most satisfying. This simplicity is not a lack of ambition, but a focus on what is truly essential. It is a way of clearing the clutter from our hearts so that peace has room to grow. There was a woman who spent her whole life trying to find the perfect place to live, thinking that once she found it, she would finally be happy. She moved from the city to the country, and from the country to the mountains, but everywhere she went, she found something to complain about. Finally, she met a teacher who told her that she was like a person trying to find a place where the wind never blows. Instead of looking for a place without wind, he suggested she learn to build a house that is sturdy and warm. The house is our own mind. When our internal world is built on the foundations of mindfulness and kindness, we can be happy anywhere. Building this internal house takes time and patience, but it is the most rewarding work we will ever do. Each moment of awareness is a brick. Each act of compassion is the mortar. Over time, we create a sanctuary that we can carry with us wherever we go. The noise of the world might still rattle the windows, but the heart of the house remains warm and still. We become a place of refuge for ourselves and for others. People will notice that when they are around us, they feel a little bit calmer, a little bit more at peace. This is the greatest gift we can give to a noisy world, the gift of our own stillness. It is a quiet form of service that doesn't require any grand gestures. It is simply the act of being present, of listening with an open heart, and of responding to the world with a gentle spirit. When we are at peace, we are like a lighthouse that guides others through the storm. We don't need to tell them what to do. Our very existence is a reminder that the shore is near and that the water is safe. As we move through the remaining hours of our day, we can hold this sense of inner quiet like a precious jewel. We can protect it from the dust of irritation and the noise of haste. We can remember that we are the sky, the ocean, and the sturdy house. We have everything we need to be at peace right now, in the middle of this noisy, beautiful world. There is no need to hurry, no need to worry, and no need to be anyone other than who we are. The realization that we are already whole allows us to move through the world with a sense of playful lightness rather than a heavy sense of mission. We begin to see that the noise of the world is not a barrier to our spiritual growth, but the very soil in which it takes root. Without the challenges of a busy environment, we would never develop the muscles of patience and the depth of understanding that true peace requires. It is easy to be calm in a silent room, but to maintain that same quality of presence while navigating a difficult conversation or a stressful project is the mark of a heart that has truly found its center. This inner stillness becomes a hidden melody that plays underneath all our experiences, providing a constant sense of rhythm and grace. There is a beautiful teaching from the life of a great elder who was once approached by a king. The king asked for the most profound secret to a happy life, expecting a complex philosophical answer. The elder simply said, "Eat your rice when you are hungry, and sleep when you are tired." The king felt insulted by such a simple response, but as he reflected on it, he realized the depth of the message. We are rarely ever just eating our rice or just sleeping. Our minds are always elsewhere, chewing on the past or dreaming of the future, creating a cacophony of mental noise that drowns out the simple joy of the present. When we fully engage with the simple acts of our lives, the noise of the world naturally falls away. This path of simplicity is a return to our true nature, which is inherently quiet and clear. Think of a fountain that has been clogged with debris for years. The water is still there, pressing to get out, but it can only trickle through the gaps. When we remove the stones of our constant worrying, the sticks of our judgments, and the leaves of our distractions, the water of our inner peace flows freely once again. It doesn't require us to add anything to our lives, it only requires us to let go of what is blocking the flow. This letting go is the most profound act of self-care we can perform. In the old accounts, there is a story of a young man who was tasked with carrying water from a distant well to his master's house. He had 2 pots, one of which was perfect and the other which had a small crack. Every day, the perfect pot arrived full, while the cracked pot arrived only half full. The cracked pot felt ashamed and apologized to the young man for its flaw. The young man smiled and told the pot to look at the side of the path they walked every day. The cracked pot noticed that on its side of the path, beautiful flowers were blooming, while the other side was barren. The young man had planted seeds along the path, and the cracked pot had been watering them every day. Our lives, with all their imperfections, noises, and cracks, have the potential to bring beauty into the world in ways we may not even realize. The struggle to be perfect and the noise of our own self-criticism often blind us to the flowers we are watering simply by being who we are. When we accept our own cracks, the internal noise of inadequacy is replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. We see that every challenge we face and every noise we navigate is an opportunity to cultivate more kindness, more resilience, and more grace. We are not just surviving a noisy world, we are transforming it through our own presence. We can imagine the quality of our awareness as a warm, golden light that we carry within us. When we walk into a room, that light gently touches everything around us. It doesn't demand anything, it doesn't judge, and it doesn't make a sound. It simply illuminates. By being a source of such light, we help to soften the harsh edges of the world for everyone we meet. We don't need to change the world's volume, we only need to change our own vibration. A heart that is filled with peace is like a tuning fork that encourages everything around it to vibrate in harmony. As the day continues to unfold, we can practice moving with the flow of events rather than trying to push against them. If a plan changes, we can see it as a new path to explore. If a noise arises, we can see it as a new sound in the symphony of the moment. This fluidity is the secret to staying young in spirit and calm in heart. We become like water, which is the softest thing in the world yet can wear away the hardest stone. By being soft and receptive, we overcome the hardness of the world's pressures. There is a sense of great relief in knowing that we don't have to carry the weight of the entire world on our shoulders. We only have to be responsible for our own peace, for our own kindness, and for our own presence. When we take care of our own inner garden, we find that we have plenty of flowers to share with those who are walking by. The noise of the world may continue, but it no longer feels like a threat. It is just the sound of life being lived, a vibrant and chaotic dance that we are privileged to witness. We can take a moment now to feel the quiet space within us, that sanctuary that is always available. It is a place of infinite depth and absolute safety. No matter what happens in the world outside, this space remains untouched. It is our true home, our refuge, and our strength. By returning to this space again and again, we become more familiar with the silence than with the noise. We realize that the silence is the reality, and the noise is just a passing show. This deep knowing brings a smile to the heart and a light to the eyes. We walk through the busy streets and the crowded markets with a secret joy, knowing that we are never truly separate from the peace we seek. We are the peace. We are the stillness. We are the quiet heart of a noisy world. Every breath we take is a celebration of this truth, and every step we take is a movement toward a more compassionate and harmonious life. As we go forward, we can let our words be fewer and our actions be kinder. We can let our listening be deeper and our judgments be softer. In this way, we contribute to a collective silence that is more powerful than any noise the world can produce. We are part of a quiet revolution of the heart, a movement of people who choose to be steady when everything is shifting and calm when everything is shouting. This is the path of the wise, a path that leads us back to ourselves and to the profound beauty of being alive in this very moment. The world will always have its sounds, its movements, and its colors. We can enjoy them all without being lost in them. We can be like the lotus flower that grows in the mud but remains pure and beautiful above the water. We are in the world, but the world's noise does not have to be in us. We carry our own silence, our own light, and our own peace. This is the greatest treasure we possess, a treasure that increases the more we share it. May your heart always be a sanctuary of quiet joy. May your mind be as clear as a mountain lake. And may your life be a beautiful song that brings peace to everyone who hears it. We are all travelers on this path together, and every step we take in stillness is a gift to the entire world. There is nothing to fear, nothing to hurry, and nothing to lose. Everything we need is already here, within the quiet rhythm of our own breathing.